Greetings everyone, welcome to this new video. We're gonna take a look at the One Exalted build guide, where I take a meta skill and I transform it into something that everyone can afford. We take that One Exalted, we buy all the gear, all the jewels and everything, and then we showcase it. You can see in the background right now that we have a tier 15 map. Sadly, I did not have any tier 16 left, but I've done both tier 15 and tier 16 and all the bosses in this game right now with this build budget version. And even better, if you transform it with the cost priest, that obviously should be our next upgrade for this build. That means you're gonna skyrocket, you're gonna have a DPS in the millions. But right now, this kind of gear is plenty and you can get through all the content that you need while you're farming up your Atlas completion here. So the concept that I'm after is give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So hopefully by you looking at this and understanding it, you can create your own build guides in the future. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. For our gear, we're mostly using generic items, which means that we're gonna have the maximum amount of life and capping out our resistances. I always leave a suffix open on most of my gear pieces if I can have it, because that means if I'm changing out one gear piece for another, that means I can just put on the rest that I'm lacking or have too much of. Then I can take away those crafts and just put it in something else. And also if I have too much resistance, then I can just craft something else on there. Otherwise, most important is probably gonna be the weapons, and the weapons is gonna need adds to cold damage to spells. Is where important is to spells, because otherwise nothing of this is gonna affect our frostbolt and ice nova, so super important there. Same for cold damage, is not gonna affect by itself our damage on those, so it needs to say spell. Other stats are important. Might want to pick up some accuracy if you can, but more importantly it's going to be increased attack speed, because we want our cyclone to hit as fast as possible. And the reason for that is the faster it hits, the more it's going to proc our custom crit, and hopefully gonna shoot out more frostbolt and ice novas in turn. Other important stats is gonna be maybe from your Amulet. You can pick up some really nice stats here, as you can see, and of cold damage leeches life is probably the most important one. You can pick that up on rings also, and or you can use a frigid fossil and craft it yourself on there. What it does is basically it takes care of all our leeching needs, and while you're spinning around on top of enemies, you're gonna continuously leech the life you need. On our 6th link here, you can use the Dapper Prodigy Divination card. That's what I used in the beginning of the league, so it became super cheap. Pick up 6 of those cards, I believe, and then just turn it in. But it is a little bit of a gamble, because you get eye level 100 random one, so you might not get the one you want, because you're gonna need either an evasion chest, energy shield chest, or a hybrid between the two, because you're gonna need to have 3 blue ones or 3 green ones. At least those were the gems that I've chosen to actually use in this. You might choose something else, but those were the ones that I found most beneficial for my build. For my belt here, I crafted it myself because I had one of these shape belt drops, and I just put I put in 5 chaos into it and just rolled it, because the increased cooldown recovery speed is gonna be very important later on in the game, where we want when we actually switches out these weapons for Cosplay Malice, and we are gonna actually skyrocket this build to the next hemisphere, honestly, because that means we're gonna just shoot spells, so many spells all around us, and this one is gonna make it so we shoot even more frequent. So it's basically gonna bring down the server ticks from I believe it is 4 to 3 server ticks instead, or was it 5 to 4? I can't remember. You can watch my video on this that I released a week ago. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything that important, unless you want the mandatory things here. There's two mandatory things you want. Is Tempered Mind. If you put it here, that means it converts all that intelligence into accuracy. That takes care of all your accuracy needs, because we want as close as possible to get to 100% hit rate with our Cyclone. That means we can crit on those enemies. That means we can actually not spin around and not do anything on bosses, for example. So super important, and it's super cheap. It's like 1 or 2 chaos. Same thing here, Frozen Trail. You can pick it up from while you're questing up to it's actually a quest gem you can pick up, but you can also buy it for 1 alchemy orb or something like that. The reason is because our frostbolt becomes this 2 additional frostbolts, and that means when we're shooting out those extra frostbolts, our Ice Nova can actually proc from that. Otherwise, critical strike is basically handled by our assassin. That's why we chose this one, and the accuracy is done here. So those are the 2 biggest hurdles you basically have to take care of in any custom crit build, but assassin takes that into account, and it becomes really easy to reach high crit rates. Also for a flask, it's gonna we're gonna need a diamond flask to get that critical strike chance. It's lucky to get that all the way up to 100%. That means we're always hitting, always critting, and so on. We're gonna need a life flask, instant. I always use instant here because there might be those moments where you like dip down all of a sudden to almost no health and you was just recover fast. I use quart flask. Phasing is quite nifty because that means you can just run through the enemies, and because we're right on top of them spinning around, we do not want to be hindered by our enemies, so we just want to spin wherever we want to. And also the Wise Oak is not needed. I used, if you do not have the cold damage leashes life, I would suggest that you go for this one at Zero Promise. Should be super cheap right now because that means it takes care of your leeching for you. So I would interchange these 2 like that. But I have a leech on my amulet. That means I can do Wise Oak. When you use Wise Oak, make sure that your cold damage is your highest elemental resist, which is not now. I should have taken care of that. I switched around some gear because I wanted this one to be an 1 exalted. So obviously the showcase I showed you, I did not use this one. Yeah, that was quite a mistake. But they should be better for you then, so it's a win-win then. For our movement speed, we want one with adrenaline and Quicksilver flasks to get that extra movement speed, because we are gonna, together with Mistwalker, it's gonna you are gonna run so fast with this build. And I also use Phase Run to run even faster. So there we have all the different gear pieces. For this section, we're gonna take a look at the trading that I do to get all these items, because I think the thing that most people have a problem with is finding valuable items for a low price. So we're gonna take a look at how I go about this. Obviously, in the beginning, you might want to use this site, which is going to be in the description, but in the future, you're probably going to memorize which mods are going for which kind of items. So that is hopefully a step you can jump over sometime in the future, but I'm not there right yet, and we are going to pick up runic daggers because we want a melee weapon and we want a good implicit. The implicit on runic dagger, which you can see here, it's gonna be at the increased global critical strike chance, which means our Cyclone is gonna crit more, which is very good, and it's a melee skill, so super good. That means we're gonna pick up some of the stats. We have the prefixes here on the left, we have the suffixes on the right. We can have 3 of each section. We might not want to worry about anything down here. We only want to worry about the 2 on top. So right now we want spell damage, of course, because our main source of damage is going to be from frostbolt and ice nova. We do not worry about the damage comes out from cyclone. Do not scale that one. We actually want it as low as possible because of physical reflect. So do not scale that one. That means we can go all the way up to over 100 in spell damage. So now what I do, I go over to my 100 weapon on the trade site. I write in crit, and I scroll all the way down here. You can write in more if you want. And I write in the implicit at the top of it. That means when I do the search here, the only weapons that are gonna come up is gonna be the rune daggers, which is super good. That means I'm already sorting out. You can probably write in rune dagger here also if you want, but I find this more intuitive. Also any non-unique, so we don't get these kind of things because we don't care about those. Then I'm gonna create a second group. I'm gonna do this as a count because there's a certain amount of mods. We cannot expect to get all the mods, but well, we can if we want to really pay for it for a few exalted, but we can go for a few of them at a time. So what are those? We wanted spell damage. We already established that. So spell, and the pseudo means it takes from all sources on there. So we're gonna have spell damage, increase cold spell damage. That means spell damage by itself is gonna count into this, or any other source of spell damage that's gonna increase our cold damage. So very good. I think it's only gonna be spell damage either way, but we might as well be safe here. So I'm gonna put in 50 here. That is a reasonable number. Actually, we can go higher in the future here, but we have to take a look first. Here we have the next one. It's increased cold spell damage a certain amount, a flat amount. Let's see what the highest one is. It's up here, so somewhere around 30-40. We're gonna increase the spell, and we're gonna put in this one. We're gonna put in 30. And next one we're gonna put in is attack speed also, because I know these can also roll attack speed. There we go, and it can roll all the way up to over 20. So we're gonna put in attack speed. We're gonna put in 15 there, and I'm gonna create another group because I always find it important. Actually, we can do this first. We can show here that if I'm doing this, the prices are quite high. I mean, this one is reasonable, and even have all cold spell then. Yeah, this one is actually insanely good. If you have room for this, because this one is gonna increase all your gems, not only the ones that are socketed in here, it's gonna increase all of these ones. So this one would be insanely good for endgame. So I would definitely, and then you, as you can see here, it had an open prefix, which is something I want to talk about also. That means we can craft this one. But let's say this one was not here, which is obviously is. If you want to search for these, you can add this mod also, but it's extremely expensive mod normally. This one, yeah, it's quite cheap. So I put in two, sorry, not one, two, two of these. And now I'm gonna do and more here. That means if any of these two arrives here on the items, right now we have 2 items pop up, so next one is gonna be 208. Obviously I don't want to go through 208. I want to write prefix here, and I want to have an empty prefix on my item. That means I can craft any of these. That means actually we're gonna change this one and put it here. Attack speed 15, and change this one to 1. Now what this does is that I know I can craft from my crafting bench. I can go there and I can do this one, and I can craft up to 50 spell damage, and or I can craft cold damage to spells. And cold damage to spells is quite high already on the crafting, so I would probably look for the one that gives me the highest cold spell here. So we just scroll down and voila, we have one here. This one is a hybrid together, so if that means I can actually buy this one and craft myself cold damage to spells, and we are golden. This is only 10 chaos. You can probably find something even cheaper. Well, 0 chaos. Same thing with this one. Again, these are super cheap, and if you even want it even cheaper, you activate live search and you just pick up while someone is actually putting them out. So this is my biggest tip. If you want really cheap prices and you want not the leftovers that no one else wanted, then you put in a live search and you just pick up an item when it actually pops up on the screen. Then you do this for every single item you have. If you want jewelry, a ring for example, then you do the same. Free prefixes, free suffixes. You click, click, click and see how high. Then you go back, and on the weapons I left here empty prefix, but on all the other gear pieces I would do empty suffix instead, because suffixes are so much more important on those items. So let's go over to next. For the passive tree we're gonna go with the assassin, and that means for one simple reason, we want as much crit as possible on our build. And with opportunistic we are gonna pick this one as our first lab, because of if you're using freezing pulse, you can look at my guide for that, how to level that one up as a stepping stone to give this one over to cost on crit, because cost on crit can only be done when you have your first 6th link. So I always pick this one first for some extra damage, movement speed and so on. Otherwise, for the next 2 labs, I'm gonna go all the way down here. That means we're gonna max out our crit super easy. We do not need any other really items that are boosting our crit more than some crit nodes on the tree, which we are walking by anyway, but we're not going out of our way to pick that. And lastly, for Uber Lab we would go for Mistwalker. Mistwalker is some more survivability and some more attack speed for our Cyclone, and also some movement speed, which is very much appreciated. Otherwise we just go down this route, we pick up some damage nodes, some life, go down this, some crit multiplier, and we pick our way all the way down to this section. And I went with acrobatics first and then just left these for later on, but you can go all the way here. If you want to go for some crit chance here, you can, but again not really needed here in the start. That means I would start building up right here, taking up some life here, and then I would pick up these nodes right there, and then I will continue up here, which means that we're gonna get these ones. You can also anoint this one node and then just go down this route. I've seen some people do, but yeah, not really needed again. I would pick up these nodes, also some extra spell damage, because I find it more important to do a little bit of a glass cannon build, which means that we're gonna die a lot, but we're also gonna do a lot of damage for early game. I did not die because nothing that if you kill it instantly, they're not gonna hit you, and they do no DPS when they're dead. So otherwise we do not want to pick up these as a first kind of thing. We want to do that a little bit later when we have all our all the way down here, because we want to be able to actually generate enough crit for it. And then some life, obviously, for survivability. Then we work our way down here, take these nodes, and then finally go all the way over here. We're gonna need to pick up obviously the jewel nodes here, because if we're gonna switch over, we're gonna need the frozen trail and tempered mind here to put them in. But generally this is the tree we're going with, and yeah, It was pretty easy to level with as a freezing pulse, and then just switched over, and I did not need almost no regret orbs at all to make this next section work. So very easy transition and very smooth that way. Let's go over to next. For the skill gems, we are gonna have in our main link, we're gonna have Cyclone, increase critical strike to support our extra crit here. We're gonna have frostbolt, cost on crit of course, otherwise we are not gonna proc anything, and ice nova and hypothermia. Make sure that the frostbolt is before ice nova, because we want our frostbolt to shoot out, and then we want ice nova to go on top of them, so very important there. You can probably pick other links there if you want, but those are the ones I had, and those are the ones I used. And those are plenty for all the tier 16 maps. So otherwise, I have as auras, I have Innervate tagged with Herald of Ice. You can also go with Onslaught gem, is very good if you want some extra movement speed and some attack speed and so on. Otherwise, go for Ice Golem, also gives a really good boost to some accuracy and critical strike if you're lacking on those departments. It's a little bit hard to keep up, so you might want to put it in your cost and crit setup if you want to. Otherwise, we have as our buffs here, Celerity is really good because you're gonna spin on one spot most of the time on bosses. That means you're gonna put in concentrated ground, they take more critical strike, or you're easier to crit on that, and you also regen 6% I believe life per second. And this gives a huge buff, super good. Celerity is definitely the best one. And otherwise, precision level 1, I have it level 3 for some reason, but you only need a level 1. Increased crit and some extra accuracy for just a minimum amount of, so it's a very good buff. Otherwise, do I have any more auras? No, I don't. Also, the Herald of Ice is gonna make all the explosions, so it's gonna look very cool. And especially if you have a Celestial MTX like I do. Otherwise, cost on crit, we have everything on level 1 here, so it's gonna crit all the time. We only want the Wave of Conviction. It makes them exposure, elemental resistant, matching the elements, so that means that they're gonna take more damage. Frost Bomb, also you put it down, it's gonna debuff the enemy. And Frostbite is our curse here, also debuffing the enemy. This is gonna proc all the time on bosses and on enemies, so it's very good to just debuff. And for single target help, we're gonna have Vortex, because Vortex we can cast while we're spinning around, so it's not gonna stop and cast it. So while you're spinning with Cyclone, you can cast this at the same time. So Vortex linked with Hypothermia, Unbound Element, and Bone Chill to get that extra damage and slowness on the enemies. That means they're basically gonna be stuck in an attack animation for lower maps all the time, and even on higher maps when you actually scale your damage. I also have some extra one, which is Phase Run, and yeah, and a Portal Gem. You can also have a movement skill gem, but I just find it not necessary really, because we have so much movement speed on this build anyway, so I would not go for it. So there we have the skill gems. For our bandits, we are gonna kill them all for the extra 2 passive point. I always go with this. I always find it the best because I can utilize those points much better than what any of the bandits will give me. And for the Pantheons, we are just gonna go with Soul of Solaris or Soul of Lunaris, obviously upgraded. I've not gotten to that point yet, but these should be, if you're upgrading them, I would probably go with Soul of Lunaris. And Soul of Shakiri for the minor one, and you want it mainly because immune to poison. So when you get the Desert Springs map, you want to put in your vessel in that one and just achieve that one. That means you can completely don't care about any poison damage at all, which might be very useful on some bosses and some things and some mobs. So those are my Pantheons and Bandits. So there we have the one exalted cost and crit build guide. Hopefully you liked it. I know it's a little bit different what I normally do, but it's because the league have changed, and I also want to put out this video before I go on my holiday break, which is in just a few days. I'm traveling away to Sweden, so it's very important that I get this out because a lot of people had problems with custom crit and how to make it budget friendly. It's not a budget friendly build otherwise, but you can definitely make it, as you can see here. So I want to thank you for your dedication of sitting through this long video, and hopefully this will help you in the future. Subscribe to my channel and put a like on this video if you could. That would help me immensely. Have an awesome day, everyone.